man, it's 2016 and a new 3D Realms game is out? If you'd have told me this would happen back when we all thought they were shutting down in 2009, I would not have believed it. Of course, this is the new 3D Realms based in Denmark since Interceptor Entertainment bought the brand in 2014. But let's get to the game at hand. Bombshell, developed by Interceptor and published by 3Denmark Realms in 2016 for the PC. These are the same folks that rebooted Rise of the Triad and were working on Duke Nukem Reloaded before it was shut down. Bombshell itself began as a Duke Nukem game as well, Mass Destruction, but it had to be reworked due to a lawsuit by Gearbox Software, who now owns the complete rights to the Duke Nukem IP. Artifacts of this origin aren't hard to spot either, with everything from the items in-game to the game files themselves referencing Duke every which way. But we don't have Duke. Instead, in Duke's place is Shelly Bombshell Harrison, previously intended as his sidekick dating back to the early days of Duke Nukem Forever. I've seen her referred to as Duchess Nukem, and while that's kinda clever, the only notable similarity is that they both enjoy shooting aliens while spouting one-liners. Instead of gun holsters, she's got a robot arm named Amiga that can talk to you and transform into new guns, and is also a turret sometimes because aliens. Speaking of aliens, the game begins with a Duke It Out in DC alien showdown at the White House, with you taking orders from a dude that's totally not General Graves. Seems the president's been kidnapped by an evil cyborg that's totally not Dr. Proton, and I guess you're qualified to save the day. It kind of throws you in head first, barely touching on how Shelly lost her arm in the first place, or why we should care about her story at all, come to think of it, so many of the plot developments later on fall flat. But who cares about plot if the gameplay is amazing, right? So what do you get? Adequacy, my friend. Adequacy. Bombshell may be billed as an isometric action RPG, but after playing through it, that really doesn't make sense to me. I don't get the idea that Bombshell is Diablo with guns or something, because unlike a game like Diablo, it's fond of tunneling you down lots of linear corridors with few meaningful branching paths, and there's also no skill trees, no side dungeons, no hub towns, no co-op, no looting of random weapons or armor, and no visual character customization. Although you'd be forgiven for looking at the environments and being reminded of Diablo or Torchlight or even Lord of the Rings, 3/4 of the locations seem better suited to a fantasy game if you ask me, and while several areas are admittedly gorgeous to look at, most of it strikes me as generic and kind of out of place. I was really hoping they'd revisit some more levels based on Earth, like the tutorial level at the White House, but nope. The rest of the game is filled with stock alien world backdrop number 9, followed by typical ice world backdrop number 37, followed by... this is getting boring. Look, here's a level of circles connected by drab corridors. Here's an area filled with hundreds of identical hexagons that float over annoying bottomless pits. Great! And while the last couple levels are a little more interesting, I think, there's still not a whole lot of valuable stuff to really do in there. Every so often, you'll find a really short secondary objective to complete, but I never found one that was worth my time. Usually these consist of a simple fetch quest that'll net you a paltry amount of XP, ammo, and cash. Combine this with the fact that Bombshell's few one-liners get insanely repetitious by the end of the second level, and I cast aside my normal practice of clearing each map and instead just ran from point A to point B to expedite the next level's arrival. Okay, so the story is barely there and the levels are lacking, so what about the combat and the role-playing elements? Well, passable is a word that comes to mind. You shoot, the enemies shoot back, there's a lot of shooting, and it feels decent. The execution moves are satisfying, though. At least the first few times you use them, since it really grinds the combat to a halt. And yes, you slowly gain experience points for killing things, which in turn unlocks a nominal set of improvements to kill more things. Nothing really stands out about it for me. It does what it needs to do and calls it a day. There are a few token skills to unlock like sliding, shields, and 2 forms of melee, and the rest is the standard fare of upgrading things like health, stamina, and armor. The weapons are where most of the upgrades lie, and you steadily unlock weapons throughout the story. Some of the later weapons definitely have a lot more kick than the starter ones, especially once you start adding things like explosive rounds and alternate fire modes, but none of them stand out to me, and each one simply performs its obvious role. You know, shotgun thing, rocket launcher thing, whatever. Granted, they've got silly names like the Mother Flacker and the Personal Missile System, aka PMS, but these corny jokes are no substitution for enjoyment when using these weapons. That oomph factor isn't there for any of them to me, and that's disappointing considering how much you have to use them. Even the bowling bombs, which act like smart spherical pipe bombs, are a pain to use because of their tendency to wander around all over the place and sometimes never connect with the enemy you want. Some of this could be helped by having the ability to lock onto enemies, or by including a camera that doesn't suck. And yeah, the camera, it's zoomed in way too close most of the time, meaning that enemies frequently shoot you from off-screen. You can enable an optional peek mode in the options menu, but this has to be a joke, right? Looking around with the mouse like this gives me an instant headache, and anytime you have to use a menu, it's unbelievable. And while it's less twitchy when using a controller, now you're stuck having to constantly hold the right thumbstick in the direction you want to look. Then there's the fact that you can't save your game at any time and instead have to rely on checkpoints, which isn't a huge problem until you encounter the game's overall unstable nature. In one full playthrough, I had 9 crashes to the desktop, 2 cases of reaching a point in the story which couldn't be completed, 1 crash of my entire PC, and dozens of smaller physics glitches and things like getting stuck in the ground.
Shield activate, shield activate, shield activate, shield activate, shield activate, shield activate.
It's worth noting that I am playing this on pre-release code since 3D Realms sent me a copy for this review, and they have since fixed the show-stopping bugs I had, so that's good. But there's all the rest of it still, and at this point, it's only days away from launch, so I worry about the status for everyone else on day 1. Man, this is a bummer. Getting a game I had hopes for from a developer that I really respect, and then having to pick it apart is never fun. So let's kill it with kindness for a few, shall we? For one thing, the soundtrack rocks. The theme song rocks, the loading screen music rocks, and while the background tracks while you're exploring are often predictable, there are even a few of those that stand out, like this one that reminds me of Deus Ex: Human Revolution. Another fun feature is the fact that it frequently references Duke Nukem in classic Apogee games, and as a huge fan of their legacy, I was quite happy. Finding the skeletal remains of Commander Keen or hearing about Duke from a GDF arms dealer was great. And finally, may not have Duke in it, but it did have the voice talents of John St. John, which wins a thumbs up from me.
It was asleep for a few millennia, but don't worry. I woke it just for you.
On the other hand, Bombshell's voice rarely has any discernible personality.
It's not difficult to see why Haskell turned against his own. He dedicated a lifetime to his ideas, only to have them rejected in their moment of triumph.
Maybe it's supposed to be stoic, but it was a bit much, and practically every grunt in the game that you run into sounds like a guy off the street speaking into a headset.
Thank you, ma'am. That was more than I can handle. I got him way over my head.
Yeah, and you're lucky it didn't get ripped off.
Yeah, I know.
Crap, I was supposed to be saying nice things. Oh, well, I tried. But no matter which way I cut it, Bombshell is a game that, for every awesome thing it has going for it, it lets me down with 2 more. It leaves a good first impression, though. Those first couple levels are pretty fun, and man, it's nice to shoot some evil aliens in a 3D Realms game again. But it's a character-driven action game that seems to have forgotten the character part, and instead just relies on action with no soul. The 10-hour campaign was a real slog to get through, and even though there's a New Game Plus mode, I can't imagine ever giving it a shot. Seeing as there are lots of similar games that do this kind of gameplay better, I cannot recommend picking it up for the asking price of $35. That said, I still look forward to seeing what the team at Interceptor comes up with next, but for me, Bombshell was more bomb than, shell. Bombshell. Well, that made me sad, but there's still the Build Engine prequel that is coming out sometime in the future. There's a beta that's available that I haven't played yet because it didn't come with my early copy, but I will be getting that, and I will be covering that in the future, and that is a prequel to Bombshell made in the Build Engine. That's such a cool thing to me. I'm still excited about that. I hope that that's something worth playing. We'll see once that comes around and is out of beta or whatever. But yeah, that's all for this video today. You can always check out some of these others here if you would like to do so. And as always, thank you very much for watching.